What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and today we're going to be ranking all 16 movies that I saw this summer. So let's do that. Before we get started, if you guys like talking about anything movies, video game, or TV related, consider subscribing down below. I've done a bunch of reviews already on my channel on previous movies that came out this year, and I'm going to do a lot more on movies in the future. And another quick reminder, just remember that this is just my tier list. I would love to hear your guys' tier list down below. Let me know if you've seen all of these movies. If you want to throw a little extra movies in there as well that you've seen, I would be definitely happy to look at those lists as well. There's a lot of movies this summer that I was not able to see either. So there's going to be movies that I'm sure you guys love that are probably the top of your list at your summer movies that I wasn't unfortunately able to see due to time or other different restraints. But let's go ahead and kick off this top 16 movies of the summer with Meg 2. Now, to be perfectly clear, I enjoy pretty much every single one of these movies on this list. I don't think there's a bad one of the bunch. They all at least entertain me to a certain level where I would find these movies that I would watch again. But with Meg 2, the reason why it's at the bottom of my list is because to me, the story really made no sense. It didn't really kind of pick up of what Meg 1 really did well, which was a lot of action, Jason Statham fighting sharks, where this one didn't really do too much of that shark versus Jason Statham, which was really unfortunate. And again, like I said, most of the movie didn't really make sense. There was a lot of plot points that left holes open, and they never really revisited or answered those questions throughout the entire movie. But overall, I think this movie is still pretty cool. It does a really good job towards the third act with all these sharks and squids and Jason Statham fighting with explosions and a bunch of different actions. So overall, I was still pretty much entertained with this movie, but it comes in at my number 16. Coming in at number 15 is Insidious The Red Door. Now, this movie was pretty entertaining. Like I said, mostly movies are on this list. The issue I have with this movie is that it uses a lot of previous events to kind of fill in time within the movie. So there's not a lot of new ideas. The concept of the Red Door was actually pretty good, having, you know, the father and son being brainwashed and the demon kind of coming back and them having to close this red door, which is kind of like that portal between the other side and our real world, which was pretty interesting as well because the son and father were miles away from each other, so they weren't really able to work together to do that. So I think overall the concept and the idea was actually pretty good, but the execution was what kind of made it lacking. And I've never really been a big fan of the Insidious storyline regardless. I think one of the best ones was called The Last Key, or the first one was pretty interesting as well. But for the most part, I wasn't really a big fan of the Insidious franchise, so that's why this one kind of comes a little bit lower. But I do think there are some elements that didn't really work as well as some of the other Insidious movies in this one. There are still some things kind of lacking, and bringing back these characters to kind of just flesh out the story a little bit more. It's not always good when they're kind of going to kind of that sort of last resort type of film where, you know, hey, remember these characters, let's bring them back and show you a new movie and something new that's been going on with them in their life years down the line from the second movie, I believe it is. So overall, I think this movie was pretty entertaining. Not too many scares in this one. It's not as scary as some other movies can be, which is kind of unfortunate. You want to be scared. And Insidious is pretty known for jump scares, which I hate. I think jump scares are cheap. You know, they're not suspenseful, and I prefer a little bit more suspense and kind of keeping you on the edge of your seat, which this movie doesn't really do too much until kind of the last act, which was, for the most part, probably the most entertaining part of the entire movie. So with that being said, Insidious The Red Door comes in at my number 15. And coming in on my number 14 is Zoe 102. Kind of a weird movie, not really necessary from the earlier shows of Zoe 101, but this was kind of a cool little nice movie to see, kind of bringing back some old characters, some nostalgia for me, because I did watch the show when I was a little bit younger. But the movie doesn't, you know, have too much merit to kind of go on. There's not a lot of things going on here. Zoe 102, of course, is older. They're all older. Gwen and Logan are getting married, and there's just this big wedding, and Zoe is trying to multitask her work while also trying to be a bridesmaid as well. So there's a lot of different kind of fun things to be had here. Acting is terrible as usual with kind of some Nickelodeon actors that didn't really go anywhere. And Paramount Plus has been doing this kind of thing where they're taking old shows and bringing them back into the limelight with newer movies. Like Zoe 102, the new iCarly show. They're doing a new Good Burger here pretty soon. So, these movies are kind of nice to see, seeing some old characters that give you kind of a little bit of nostalgia if you watch the shows when you're a little bit younger. And that's kind of why it's not really at the bottom of my list. It just has a little bit more nostalgia for me than the two movies that are below this one. But overall, this movie was kind of fun. It was ridiculous. It was funny at times. It had some social commentary, but overall, it's a movie that you can enjoy. Not really something I would watch over again. This is probably one of the only movies out of this entire list that I really wouldn't watch again unless I really wanted to watch Zoe 102. But if that was the case, I'd rather just watch the show, which is a lot more rewatchable than this movie. But with that being said, Zoe 102 comes in at my number 14. And coming in on my number 13 is Slaughterhouse, the most recent review I have done here on my channel. And if you've seen my review, you guys already know my opinions on this movie. But basically, this movie is talking about a young girl who wants to be the president of her college sorority. And she buys a pet sloth thinking that's going to win her votes to become president. And instead of doing that, it reduces the sorority capacity with the murder sloth on the loose. Now, when I first saw the poster, I had to see this movie because sloths are one of my favorite animals of all time, and it just looked like a lot of silly fun to be had, which that's really all this is. There's not too much things to kind of pick apart here. The sloth being the murderer is a fun, silly concept, and I really had a good time in the theaters. There was a lot of good laughs, a lot of funny jokes. Seeing the sloth murder people was hilarious. Some interesting kills here and there. The overall story was not really something to write home about, but it still had some kind of underlining plot that was interesting enough to kind of keep you in the seat when there wasn't the sloth there just murdering people. The dialogue was okay. Like I said, in my review, the acting was pretty abysmal. It's not something that you kind of go to these movies for. But at the end of the day, this movie is just pretty much full entertainment. That's really all it is, to make you laugh, put a smile on your face, and that you hope to leave the theater with some good thoughts at the end of the day. You don't want to leave disappointed with the movie, which I didn't at all. I thought this movie actually did a pretty good job at knowing what it was. It didn't take itself too serious, and it comes in my number 13 of my ranking. And coming in on my number 12 is The Machine. Now, Bert Kreischer is one of my favorite comedians, if not my actual favorite comedian of all time from the past couple of years. And this movie is talking about a legendary joke, The Machine, which was a real-life event, according to Bert Kreischer, when he went to Russia as a student in college and got involved with the Russian mafia. And this movie basically takes that story, throws you 30 years later, I believe it is, into his adult life, and the Russian mafia is now after him again because he stole a necklace when he was on a Russian train years prior when he was a student, and he has to relive those memories in Russia and try to help the Russian mafia. This is just a amazing comedy action movie that I had an amazing time with. Like I said, Bert Kreischer is one of my favorite comedians of all time. So just because of that premise, I wanted to see this movie right away. The movie didn't do that great in the box office, unfortunately. There's a huge budget, and I don't even think it met half the budget that the movie needed to make some sort of profit. But I don't think the movie came out in too many theaters either. I think it was pretty limited on the release. So, which is something you kind of can expect from a kind of low budget, in a way, like kind of looking movie from this comedian that decided to go into acting real quick to make this movie about a story of his life. And I think it does a good job. I think, the acting is decent. Bert Kreischer is obviously hilarious. You have to expect this movie to be hilarious with Bert, when, Bert Kreischer is one of the greatest comedians of all time, in my opinion. You have Mark Hamill in here playing as his father, which is a great casting. I think he does a pretty good job in here as well. Mark Hamill also does some pretty good one-liners and jokes and stuff, so he's a good presence to see on screen as well. But overall, I mean, the movie is a kind of a great comedy action movie. You know, putting in the Russian mafia in there is hilarious as well. Seeing Burt fight and use a gun and, you know, throw people around with explosions going on, while he's trying to be this cool action hero, but also scared at the same time. You know, he throws up at a certain point because he gets all nervous, which is, you know, it's just again another movie that's just a time to entertain you. That's really all this movie really is just to entertain you. There's not too much to kind of pick apart here. It's not a movie that you need to have a lot of conversations about. It's just kind of those movies. Did you enjoy it or not? And did you see it? Most people didn't, which is unfortunate, but I thought it was a great movie. And I already bought the Blu-ray. As soon as I saw it go on pre-order on Amazon, I was like, I gotta get that because I'm gonna watch that movie again, because it's just one of those movies you throw on to have a good time. A movie you throw in the background, nothing to take too serious, and the movie doesn't take itself too serious, which is good. So The Machine comes in at my number 12. And coming in at my number 11 is Barbie. Of course, I had to be a part of the Barbenheimer conversation. I did watch Barbie on opening night before Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was too full to go see in 70mm IMAX, but Barbie was not. And I actually really enjoyed this movie. This movie, you know, I gotta give it a lot of credit, right? This movie does a really good job. There's a lot of social commentary. You know, there's some good comedy in there. The acting is great. There's a good cast with Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, and there's a bunch of other different actors in there that are really well. And the visuals of this movie, the practical effects with this whole Barbie world that they created, this movie was honestly a really good time in the theaters, right? I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. The only reason I would say this movie is not higher up on my list is because the message that it was trying to send was really good until it got a little preachy. Once it got there, you know, it kind of lost me because overall the message was awesome. You know, you can see the message the entire time of the movie. I don't think it needed to go to that preachy route because I'm pretty sure most of the people in the theater understood the message that they were trying to put out there. So the message, I feel like, just didn't, you know, stick the landing. Similar to with the whole Ken situation, I think they kind of threw the Ken situation kind of in the trash, and they didn't really stick the landing on that as well. So overall, that's really the only thing that kind of, you know, holds this movie back for me, is that the overall message had a really good start and it just didn't stick the landing. But the movie was still wildly entertaining. I'm definitely going to watch it again. I had a lot of fun with it, a lot of good laughs. Like I said, good visuals, good acting. You know, overall, this movie did really well, and it's now the highest grossing movie of 2023, surpassing Super Mario Bros., which is, you know, it's an awesome thing to see. You know, I think this is also the highest grossing movie from a female director, which is another good thing to see. So it's, you know, there's movies like this that can do huge numbers in the box office. You know, these are the type of movies that we need more often than not, are movies that have conversation behind it. Not a movie that you just go see in the movie theaters and you're like, oh, well, that was good. It needs to strike some sort of conversation with people so that it keeps people coming. And you know, word of mouth is always the best type of advertising over everything else, in my opinion. Another thing I feel like this movie lacked is that it took itself on the more serious route versus trying to appeal to everybody, which is okay. I think it did a good job. It's just, I think a lot of people didn't walk in expecting that. You know, there's a lot of people that took their kids that they probably shouldn't take their kids, because this movie is definitely not a kid movie. It's more of an adult movie for sure, which a lot of people didn't expect that. I'm sure a lot of parents didn't expect that, taking their kids to this movie. But while it kind of holds it back on that end, I think it excels on the end of being an adult movie. So again, overall I really enjoyed Barbie, and it comes in at my number 11. Now, rounding off my top 10 is Strays. So Strays tells a story about a young dog named Reggie, who is abandoned by his owner and wants to seek revenge. I thought, again, this movie was pretty entertaining as well. I love dogs, you know. I have a dog as well. So, you know, when I saw this movie, at first, it didn't really pique my interest too much on the first trailer. You know, I thought it was going to be kind of a dumb movie. I didn't think it was going to be too funny. But overall, I really enjoyed the movie. There was a lot of jokes that I was laughing throughout the entire movie. I don't think there was really a dull movie and a dull moment within the movie, and apart from the first like 15-20 minutes or so, there was a sequence that was a little slow paced. But once it kind of kicks off, it kind of kicks off the entire movie, and it's just joke after joke after joke after joke. And I enjoyed the voice acting from most of these actors here. The dogs, you know, with their moving mouths, you can definitely tell that it's some sort of either practical effect or CGI, but it doesn't really take you out of the movie seeing their mouth move like humans. So overall, I think the movie did a really good job at just kind of portraying these kind of stray dogs, where one of them is already been a stray and is trying to teach this kind of rookie how to run the streets in a sense. But overall, the jokes really hit for me. You know, they all kind of landed. The movie theater, they were all laughing as well. So it was a good movie theater experience. You know, there's the plot points were good to a certain extent, right? You understand where the dog's mindset is because of his owner abandoning him. You know, you get a good ending result to the movie. You know, you're happy where the dogs end off, and it just overall did a good job for me. And I think the movie did a really well portraying these dogs, and it was again another entertaining movie where I definitely would want to watch this again. And yeah, The Strays ends up at my number 10. Coming in on my number 9 is going to be The Last Voyage of the Demeter. This movie is basically a chapter out of the Dracula book, an adaptation of the book. And this one was kind of a surprise for me. I didn't really know too much about this movie until maybe about a week before the release. So when you kind of see movies like that where they're not advertised too much, you know, there's not too much talk behind it, it can go one of two ways. It can be a hidden gem, or it can be kind of a flop, and there's a reason why there wasn't too many advertising. But this movie honestly did surprise me a lot. I think the visuals of the rain and the boat and the thunder, keeping yourself like in the dark. The movie was super dark, but it did it in a proper way where you're not like, I don't see anything. You know, this movie is incomprehensible. It definitely wasn't that type of visuals, because the lighting was still really well from the moonlight coming in. Every time the lightning would strike, you would see Dracula in the background. It did a pretty good job overall. The story obviously is from the book, so if you've ever read the book, which I have in college, you obviously know where the story kind of takes place and where it's going to lead. So you're not too fearful about our characters, or most of the characters, of where they're going to be basically ending off. And that doesn't really take me out of the movie. And if you never read the book, it shouldn't take you out of the movie either. It sets up a nice continuation for future movies, if they are going to do that, if it makes enough money to make a sequel to this movie. I think the Dracula was actually done really well with some practical effects. Of course, there was some CGI in there, but I think the visual Dracula being a lot more monstrous. It reminded me a lot of the movie Alien, where you're kind of stuck on the ship and then there's this monster kind of just picking you off one by one. The story could be slow paced at some points, but overall, it did a good job to entertain me. It was a good horror movie, you know, more suspenseful than anything over trying to do cheap jump scares, which I said earlier, I am not a big fan of. So I think The Last Voyage of the Demeter was a pretty good surprise of the summer. I know some people didn't really enjoy too much, but I had a really good time with it. And The Last Voyage of the Demeter comes in at my number 9. And coming in at number 8 is Elemental. Another surprise for me from this summer's releases. You know, Pixar has been, I feel like, struggling a little bit. A lot of Disney movies have been struggling as well. So when Elemental kind of came out, I had some hesitance, but with the success of Inside Out a few years back, it kind of gave me that same sort of vibe. So we went ahead and checked it out in the theaters last month, a little bit late from the release. And it was a big surprise. It was definitely emotional. There was a great romance story to it that I could definitely believe between these two characters. The visuals were really beautiful with this kind of big city. You have all the different kind of elements and the races and stuff. There was some social commentary kind of leaning there, but it didn't kind of blast that out at you too much. Like I said, the romance was great. The comedy was great. The only thing that I got annoyed kind of throughout the movie was the water guy. He kept crying for everything, and I felt like that was a little overdone. But overall, I think the movie did a really well job, you know, and it was a big surprise for me. I didn't think I was going to enjoy this movie as much as I did. You know, Elemental is probably one of the better Pixar movies in my opinion. and it did a great job to entertain me, and even had a really nice, cute little short at the beginning, which kind of surprised me, because when I saw that short, I thought the Elemental movie was gonna tie into Up. So if you've seen the movie, you know that there's a little Up short in the front before the movie starts, and I thought somehow I was going to connect. I was like, oh, this is strange. I was watching this, I was like, when do the elements kind of come in? But it was just a little cute short at the beginning as well, which is cool to Pixar to do that at the movie as well. But overall, I think the overall plot was really solid. The character dynamics and were really solid. All the different relationships between the fire girl and her father, the water guy and his family, and also the relationship with the fire girl, the mother kind of being that person that wants to bring people together romantically. I think the movie did overall an amazing job. The story was great, and I had a great time with Elemental in the theaters. And again, another movie that I can't wait to see again. And it comes in at my number 8. And coming in at my number 7 is Fast X. This is another surprise for me during the summer. I'm a huge Fast and the Furious fan. I love pretty much every single movie in the franchise except for The Fate of the Furious. That's kind of the only one that's kind of a stickler to me. I don't really enjoy that one too much. But besides that, I enjoy all of them. And Fast 10 had similar elements to the past few movies, where it's bombastic, big, crazy stunts that don't make sense at all. But you fill that in with Jason Momoa as the main antagonist, and his character, his charisma really brought this movie to the limelight. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I enjoyed this movie the entire time. He was pretty much a psycho. He was super hilarious. He had it was the first time in a long time where you felt that our heroes were actually in danger, right? Because it wasn't Dominic just winning every single battle. There was battles where Jason Momoa's character was actually winning, and it was bringing threats to the family, the family of Dominic Toretto. So I thought this was a great movie. It entertained the hell out of me. This probably is in my top 5 of the Fast and Furious franchise, which may not be saying a lot to some of you people that don't really enjoy this franchise, or think this franchise kind of died after the second one, or even after the first one. But I thought this movie did a really good job. It well entertained me. It was a fun time in the movie theaters. Great action sequences. Obviously some ridiculous ones that is really hard to believe. And the only thing that brings this movie into the 7 and not maybe a little, space or two higher, is the huge cliffhanger at the end, right? And, if you've seen the movie, you know what the cliffhanger is. I don't want to spoil it too much. This movie hasn't been out for that long. Maybe not that many people have seen it, but it kind of it keeps throwing plot points from other movies away. It throws it in the garbage disposal, and it's like those parts of the movies didn't even matter anymore. So now when you go back to see previous movies, those parts that were really impactful are now just like, well, okay, I guess, right? You're like, well, no one's ever gonna die, no one's ever gonna lose. All these events didn't matter previously, so that's probably the only thing that kind of holds this movie back for me, because I still have some guilty pleasure with the more ridiculous Fast and Furious movies, and them being huge action heroes and stuff like that for whatever reason. I have some guilty pleasure with those. I do enjoy the older ones a lot more, but this one definitely entertained me with Jason Momoa as the main antagonist, and he was really the star of the show in Fast X. So that brings Fast X at my number 7. And coming in at my number 6 is going to be the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I was extremely excited for this movie when it got announced, but I was expecting something a little bit different when I walked into the theater. It didn't meet my expectations of what I wanted, but it met expectations of something that I didn't know I wanted, if that makes sense. Because I didn't know that this was what the direction the movie was going to take. And I think that it overall did a great job at portraying our beloved Mario and Luigi characters, and some other characters like Princess Peach, Toad, Bowser, and Kong and stuff. So again, I think this movie did a really good job. It was entertaining. It was funny. A lot of people complained at the beginning that Mario didn't have that traditional high-pitched voice, which I'm glad he didn't. I think if that was the case throughout the entire movie, it could have been wildly annoying. He did have that high-pitched voice at certain times when he was doing little action sequences, or he was fighting, or found some coins, or when they were, racing on Rainbow Road. I think it brought a lot of different aspects from the video games. So you definitely see a lot of things like the Mushroom Kingdom, Rainbow Road, Mario Kart. There's a lot of parts where they're like the side-scrolling visuals where they're going through like New York City, or when they're actually at Mushroom Kingdom going through some of the kind of courses there. So it looks like the actual video game as a little side scroller, which is kind of a good visual to have. I thought that was actually really interesting. And overall, I think the plot was interesting enough to keep you there. Obviously, this movie was a lot catered more towards kids, but I think as an adult, you can definitely enjoy it a lot. And I hope there's, it made enough money. Let's say that it made enough money to cater a second movie. It was the highest grossing movie of the year before Barbie kind of took that title away from it. And I hope they do a like Luigi's Haunted Mansion type of movie. I think that would be an awesome take on the Mario world and the Mario universe. So again, Super Mario Bros. Was super highly entertaining. I'm sure a lot of you guys saw it. Like I said, it's the highest grossing movie of 2023 until Barbie, and it comes in at my number 6. But before we kick off my top 5, if you have enjoyed this review, make sure to like and subscribe down below. Comment down your list of these movies. If you want to add some movies of your own, you are more than welcome to. Let me know how wrong I am with my ranking and my opinions. I would love to hear all your guys' feedback. And again, if you like talking about anything movies, video games, or TV related, consider subscribing down below. Now let's kick off my top 5. And rounding off my top 5, it's going to be Extraction 2. Now, Extraction 2 is probably one of the best action movies of the year. I had to see both Extraction 1 and Extraction 2 to prepare for this ranking, and I watched them back to back, and it was actually a really good, enjoyable movie to kind of see it all as one big movie, because it kind of follows the character right after the first film. Now, with a movie coming out in the limelight of Mission Impossible as well as John Wick 4, I think this could be the better of the two and probably the best action movie of the year, which is really surprising because I am a huge John Wick fan. I think John Wick series is one of the biggest series of all time. I love John Wick as a character. So for this to be bigger for me than John Wick 4 is saying a lot. I actually really enjoyed it, and it didn't fall into that kind of black hole of Netflix movies where they're, cheaply produced, not great storylines, not a great plot, not great acting, but this doesn't do that at all, and it was wildly entertaining, great action sequences. The plot was there, it kept you on your toes the entire time. It didn't really slow down, and there was a huge sequence. I think it was they put out on a report that it was a 21-minute long sequence that was supposed to be made to look like a one shot, which is really awesome, seeing that kind of car chase, explosions going around. They jump onto the train, they're fighting these helicopters with these huge guns. You have the RPGs going off and stuff, and it's just one ginormous sequence, which is really awesome to see. And I think this movie did what the first one did great and excelled on it and did it a lot better. So Extraction 2 comes in at my number 5. And coming in at my number 4 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Now, for the longest time, this was one of my number 1 movie of the summer, but there are some other movies that came out, and after kind of reevaluating, I think this one is a great spot at my number 4. And this is probably going to be one of my highest ranked movies of the year. Now, seeing the Turtles come back to the limelight in New York is always awesome to see a new iteration of them. I am a huge Ninja Turtles fan. There were just certain things here that took me out of the movie, and I want to say take me out of the movie completely, but it was things that you're used to, and when you see it, it kind of takes you some time to adjust. And I definitely adjusted to this movie a lot more since the first time watching it. When you look at my ranking that I gave it when I first did the review, about a month ago, I gave it like a 7 out of 10, and I feel like that ranking is kind of like in the water now. This is kind of a 9 out of 10 movie for me. I think the movie did a lot of things amazing: the artwork, the visual, the story, the you know, the relationships between the brothers, between Master Splinter. You know, the main antagonist is not traditional with Shredder. You have these other mutants in the movie as well. You know, hence Mutant Mayhem. The story with April was actually really good as well, where these turtles, you know, are kind of, you know, fighting this first human that they're actually able to talk to, and they actually have a good relationship with her. They kind of like her in a way too, with them being a little bit younger, and having kind of that dumb love as well. But again, those are some of the certain things that were, for me, I needed to adjust a little bit, where the turtles were a little bit younger and less mature, this is kind of like an origin story for them in a way, a new origin story, right? A new reiteration. And I believe this movie is going to span as well a TV show, which unfortunately I'm not too happy about. I don't think this movie should have done a TV show. I understand, because, you know, with movies like this, if you go to Target or Walmart right now, you'll see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem toys everywhere. So movies like this is definitely to promote toys, shows, and stuff. But I hope that this would go into a second movie, not into a TV show. But overall, I think this movie did a lot of things well. It was one of the best movies of the year, in my opinion. And this movie comes in at number 4. And rounding out my top 3 is Gran Turismo, The Incredible True Story, which it is, and it is an amazing movie to do so. This is kind of sort of a adaptation of the video game Gran Turismo, as well as a biopic of this young boy who would play Gran Turismo pretty much every day and got the opportunity to become a real life race car driver. Now, this movie, I think, did an amazing job. It was super inspiring. The visuals were awesome. The race sequences were awesome. The sound effects, hearing the engines roar. I'm a big race fan, if you don't know that already. You could probably tell from my Gran Turismo review. I have a F1 polo on. I'm a huge F1 fan. I'm a huge GT racing fan. I have a big love for racing movies, you know, like Rush, Ford versus Ferrari. There's a new F1 movie coming out pretty soon as well, which I'm excited for. But Gran Turismo did what all racing movies should do right. Is giving you an underdog that has an inspiration and has the will to fight, and is improving over and over again and winning these races, or it just has that inspiring kind of feeling where it makes you want to do better when you leave that movie, where if this guy can do it, I can do whatever I want to. And that's the kind of feeling that you get in this movie as well. The story, of course, is a real life story, and it's a pretty inspiring story. It's pretty amazing. It's super intense. You know, obviously the main character in real life and in the movie gets into this horrific crash that could have cost his life, and he has to kind of fight his way back into becoming the race car driver he needs to be able to stay, or if not, he will get kicked out and will go back to his normal life of playing racing only on video games. And, you know, overall, I think the movie did a really good well emotionally. There were some parts where I felt were a little kind of dull, but there was also some big, heavy-hearted emotional parts, especially with the main character and his father. The main character and his relationship with his girlfriend was a little, you know, choppy. You can't really believe it too much, but maybe they were just trying to stick really true to what happened in real life and not over-romanticize it and make it seem like it was fake. Because a story like this sounds fake when you kind of look at the overall picture. It's kind of hard to believe that something like this happened to somebody, but it really did. And with that being said, with the super entertaining movie, Gran Turismo comes in at my number 3. And coming in at number 2 is Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's newest film about J. Robert Oppenheimer creating the nuke. Now, this movie, I've seen it twice already. A lot of people said that they would never see this movie ever again. Some of the review people that I watch, that it was a masterful movie, but they wouldn't see it again. I love this movie. I saw it twice, and both times I enjoyed it just as much. The second time, I got to see things that I didn't notice previously, or hear lines that I didn't hear previously, because Christopher Nolan movies are kind of famous nowadays from bad audio. But overall, I thought the story was amazing. Obviously, this is kind of a more of a biopic, kind of tragic story, because obviously the events that happen are real with the nuke in World War II, which is unfortunate, you know. But at the end of the day, the movie was filmed, directed beautifully. The visuals were amazing, all the practical effects, right? This movie had zero CGI, according to Christopher Nolan. It was all practical effects. So when you see that and you look at the movie and see the visuals that you are watching, and especially if you saw the movie in 70mm IMAX, it was incredible. The score was amazing. Probably one of the best scores Christopher Nolan has ever had, at least for sure in my opinion. It's one of the best scores Christopher Nolan's ever had in his movies. The acting, was amazing. All the relationships, friendships were incredible. It was a huge casting. There was big names everywhere. You have Robert Downey Jr. that will probably win Best Supporting Actor of the Year. You have J. Robert Oppenheimer that can probably win Best Acting, Best Lead Acting as well in the year with this movie. Christopher Nolan can probably win Best Director of the Year for this movie as well. So this movie, it definitely has a high standard when it comes to filmmaking, and it's an inspiring movie overall, and a great film, and it kept me smiling on the edge of my seat the entire time. I enjoyed it from beginning to end. This is a very long movie, 3-hour long movie. It's very easy to get bored, but Christopher Nolan does an amazing job to keep you entertained and not wanting to look away. So Oppenheimer comes in at my number 2. And coming in at my number 1 is Blue Beetle. This was definitely a huge surprise for me. Blue Beetle, I don't know too much about the character. I've only seen a couple of things of him in like the Batman animated series. I know he popped in there once, I believe. And this was pretty much my first experience with Blue Beetle, and I thought this movie did an amazing job. There's still some kind of mix-up whether there's going to be a DCEU movie, a DCU movie. I'm assuming it's depending on how good the movie does. And I know the box office wasn't that great with Blue Beetle. I know not too many people probably didn't watch it because it's another DC movie, and people have been disappointed with DC movies for years on end. But this is probably one of the best DC movies I have ever seen. I really enjoyed the family dynamic. I think Zolo did a great job as Blue Beetle. George Lopez in this movie is hilarious. The emotion in this movie is big. Great action sequences. A lot of people compare this to like Ant-Man or Iron Man. I can definitely see that. There's only so much you can do with a superhero to a point where things are gonna start to look similar, right? Where you have a huge Marvel company, huge DC company making all these superheroes, hundreds of superheroes. At a certain point, they're going to cross, right? They're not all going to be unique in their own merit, which that's why I really understand when people say that it looks like Ant-Man or Iron Man. I completely understand where they're coming from, but I think this movie does just as good as what those movies did, and it has a Marvel level of entertainment when it comes to Blue Beetle. So I really enjoyed this movie. I thought the entire time was just an amazing sequence. You have great fight sequences, great comedy, great dialogue, great acting, good relationships, huge emotions, and it kind of pays off for me. And I really, really hope that this movie does good enough to be part of the DCU, and we don't have to get a replacement for the Blue Beetle in Zolo, because they've already announced that Blue Beetle is technically going to be the first superhero of the DCU, but Superman is going to be the first movie that comes out, which is a little weird. I know that, of course, they did that strategically because this movie came out. So depending on how it does, they're just going to throw it in there. So I hope you guys enjoy this kind of ranking and review. Blue Beetle comes in at my number 1. So let me know what you guys thought about this ranking. Put your ranking down below in the comments, what you thought about all these movies. Did you see all these movies? I'm sure you guys saw a lot more movies than I probably did. There's a lot of movies that I really wish I would have saw to put in this ranking, but I wasn't able to see it before this ranking was coming out. But if you did enjoy this, make sure to like and subscribe down below. Let me know your thoughts, feedbacks. I will love to hear all of that from you guys. And again, if you guys like talking about anything movies, video games, or TV related, this is Leo's Nerd Talk, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.